Hello, hello, hello. Uh,
Hello.
Welcome to another episode of What's Really Going On in America. And today we have guest here, Patrick H. Hughes, is it?
Yep.
Nice. At
Welcome,
least some of
welcome
my
to our
communication
circus.
is good.
Nice to meet you guys today.
Oh, yes. Well, we met at your house, but definitely Johnny's happy to meet you, right?
Absolutely. I actually watched a video while he was at your house, and and when Quinn said that you were going to be on tonight, I'm like, awesome. Get some long form conversations going, and hopefully you can explain to some of us, and by some of us I mean myself, what the hell does school board actually mean?
So, school board is a board of directors, no different than a corporation. Parkland sits on roughly, last time I was on the board, it was $216 million budget per year. Um, it's a semi-executive, judicial, and legislative body. Executive in that it appoints the superintendent of schools, legislative in the regard that it sets school policy and approves expenditures and hires, and judicial with the regard that depending upon whether or not the parent or student wishes to have a hearing in front of the entire board as it relates to student expulsions.
Okay, okay, that was actually way simpler than I was expecting.
I try to make it understandable to everybody. We also help approve curriculum, but that's a whole other long-winded responsibility.
Fair enough.
Mm. So you had some ideas of what you wanted to get into for tonight. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the topics that you think are important for us to know?
Well, there is something that is important. When I was on the board, we created this plan to help guide the district for the next 5, 10 years. Okay. And in doing so, one of the areas had to deal with the expansion of whether or not we build another middle school. We definitely had to expand the high school, and what we were going to do with like the football stadium and whatnot. And it ended up coming around the most expensive that I remember was like $150 million. Now we see it's ballooned to 213 mil the last time I checked, which
Mhm.
was today. And the last budget meeting I went to, Leslie Frisbee, the business administrator slash school board secretary, told the board members that she felt that they needed to raise taxes 5% um, for the next 5 years. Just to put that into perspective, that's 5 mils. And the problem with that is, that there are senior citizens in the district who are barely affording to get by. The district is diversifying. We see that there's at least 27%, maybe more now, of students on free or reduced lunch. Parkland is a rich school, but it's diversifying pretty rapidly. And we need to be cognizant of just how much we demand of the taxpayer. Parkland, in my opinion, has a spending problem. It doesn't have a budget problem per se. And we could get into that further if you want.
Oh, go ahead. Get as deep as you want to get into. I mean, today this is all about educating all of us.
So, for instance, one of the areas that people still talk to this day about my tenure on the board was the, believe it or not, this school this scoreboard for of all things swimming, and the administration wanted the Cadillac of scoreboards, and it was ridiculously expensive. And myself and another board member were looking at different costs for different options. on top of the ones that were proposed. And the price was astronomical. The price was absolutely astronomical. And
And you said this was a scoreboard?
this was a scoreboard. This was a scoreboard for swimming of all things. And at the time, the board president, Carol Fasciano, was big into swimming. So of course this was her pet project. We're talking here. And so what ended up happening was the board approved it despite all the controversy, because I said, why do we need a Cadillac of scoreboards for swimming? How many people actually come to a swimming meet versus, say, football? Okay. Not to mention, Parkland's all about the pillars of arts, education, and sports. Now, that said, the end result was far worse than you could probably imagine. Um, one of the possibilities, if I remember correctly, was to allow for, um, and I think they went through with it, if I remember correctly, but it was to allow for St. Luke's to have near total control of the advertising for the next 5 years.
Hmm.
You know as well as I do, advertising in school could be very contentious depending upon what it is and if it's woke. The other problem with that is technology. You're talking a 5 year time frame. That's probably the lifespan of the scoreboard we're talking in question. So these are some of the issues we see here. Another issue. I was just at the school board meeting this past month, and they were trying to allude to the fact that they, meaning the school board, was arguing how, like, all the money that they're getting through tax dollars directly impacts the child's education. Let me assure you, it doesn't. There's 75% of the budget goes to teacher salaries, teacher benefits, and retirement benefits, if not more. That's a huge slice of the cake right there. The other issue that we have to look at is the fact that there's buildings and grounds expenses. And I said to them, the last time I was here when I was a member, there was a different rug on in a room, a chamber that is used maybe 3 or 4 times a month for board functions, and maybe sporadically throughout the month for whatever the administration wants to do during the workday. But brand new carpeting, brand new chairs, and at most, there may be 3 people from the community there on average, outside of all the administrators that are required to be there. So you have to just think about this. How does that come into play when Springhouse Middle School's HVAC system is down? It needs to be replaced. Please explain that to me. It's idiotic. I actually voted against that expenditure for the rugs.
It's okay though. The kids can sweat. We have new carpet and chairs.
Precisely. Precisely.
Uh,
It's idiotic.
hmm. Yeah, well, so it sounds like they're more concerned about making the schools look nice and have nice scoreboards, and basically like trying to make their school look like billionaires live there, of people who are poor as it is,
I
and
wouldn't
more than the education in itself.
I wouldn't necessarily say everybody in the Parkland School District is poor. What I would say is what I've come to realize. So Republicans right now, they're very much about the tax dollar. They want to make sure that, you know, taxes are low so people could afford, like I said. On the flip side, the Democrats right now, oddly enough, really care that tax dollars are being spent appropriately for what they're assigned for. Basically, Doge, but not Doge. It's ironic and odd, as odd as that sounds. Um, Another issue that needs to be addressed is, as somebody that has Asperger's syndrome, I find it alarming how I can't tell you how many parents said that they have issues with the Parkland School District as it relates to special needs and special education, and their kids feeling like they belong and are appreciated, and that really is problematic in my eyes.
So the parents are feeling like the kids aren't being addressed properly
Correct.
for their diagnosed needs.
Correct.
I mean, I'm on the spectrum. Like
Right.
I lucked out. I got the hyper focus and the puzzletism, as my friends call it. Um, but growing up, I'm almost 40 now. Like we didn't have proper diagnosis back then. You were either
Right.
just you either went on Ritalin or your parents beat you. Like that was pretty much our
Right.
options.
Right.
Um, Fortunately for me, my parents went the not quite the beating me route, but let's just say I was motivated
Right.
and never like had to deal with the medication thing. But I mean, I look at people I that were in my class. I really don't feel that they got the proper care that they needed back then. More so because nobody understood what was going on. And we do have a long way to go in that aspect, and we need to educate our teachers and and adjust curriculums to focus on these kinds of kids rather than just throwing drugs at it, because that seems to be what we've been doing for the last 20, 30 years. um I had a better thought there. I do apologize. It's been a week.
No, no, I understand that. And let me just say, from a board perspective, what we hear in executive session and what we hear from the administration is the good stuff. Okay. There's plenty of things though that I've almost had to throw my glasses across the room and go, "You've got to be shitting with me," you know, and that happens because of problems with leadership or pure stupidity, for that matter. Um, but here at the end of the day, here's the biggest lesson when it comes to this issue with special education. I sat next to Rob Cohen. Rob Cohen strongly disagreed with me. Said we have an amazing special ed program, and I said to him, "Why don't you talk to your neighbors? Why don't you talk to your neighborhood and talk to people?" Because all you're getting is what the administration wants you to hear. You're not getting the issues. And I said
Y-
specifically, we heard that there were major ramifications with learning loss post COVID. So why are we in denial about this one singular element? Which, by the way, if you looked at the chart, it's gone up drastically. If you're looking at it like from one way or the other, the chart is going up. It's unsustainable with the cost, the sheer cost alone. So it's something that we need to address, and we need to be honest with ourselves with to find the best quality.
And,
Continue.
and you know what? And it comes down with all that. It's like the politicians. A lot of politicians like to talk about how good they are, but they don't want to listen to the people. Like many of them don't want to listen to the people as you do when the parents are bringing up concerns, or when people are bringing up concerns, because they're hoping that we, the people, will believe whatever lies they say. Oh, everything's fine, when we are clearly seeing it's not.
And can I just
But
jump
it's,
in right there? Can I just jump in right there, if you don't
oh
mind?
yeah, yeah.
So you bring up a good point, Quinn, and that is this. You know, people kind of seem to be blinded to what's going on an administrative and a school board sense when all things are going good. Then when the shit hits the fan, they're like, "What the heck is going on?" I brought up to you in before we started this about the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. Okay,
Oh yes.
here's an issue. Here's an issue that needs to be addressed. Okay. David Hine, who's up for reelection this year and has served on the board for what, 12 years now. When he was president of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, president of the board of it, um, they unilaterally removed the Pennsylvania School Boards Association from the National School Boards Association without getting a vote from all the participating school districts within the Commonwealth. Think about this. The Pennsylvania School Boards Association takes taxpayer dollars from each of the sending school districts. So why weren't the duly elected school boards involved in making that decision to divest their taxpayer dollars from the National School Boards Association? Now it's a consortium, and half the country's states belong to either this consortium or the National School Boards Association. And the root cause of it was a comment the CEO of the National School Boards Association made. Mind you, it was very distasteful. It had to do with parents during the pandemic and whatnot, with how they were acting. But the reality was, why wasn't there a vote? Furthermore, remember I told you how the School Boards Association, or sorry, the school board sets policies. This is where I think
Hold up. Uh, okay. Can you hear me,
Yep.
guys?
Yep. You remember how I said the school board sets policies?
Yes.
Here's an interesting perspective. The Pennsylvania School Boards Association sends those policies to the districts to tweak, to customize, and then to pass. So it's basically just rubber stamping. And I've voted against a lot of policy because I said, as the legislators for this corporation, so to speak, we should have the power to write our own policy, to set our own policy, and to have independence of PSBA. To the extent that I'm almost on the side at this point of saying, why are we wasting our tax dollars going to PSBA when we could be doing a better job of creating policy for our own district that matters, that follows the law of the Commonwealth, don't get me wrong, but is more attuned to the needs of each district.
Well, I mean,
Hmm.
if you think about it, your policy that works in Center City, Philadelphia, or Pittsburgh is not going to work or may not work in Potter County, Tioga County, these, very rural areas. And, you unfortunately you can't just have this uniform rule because Pennsylvania is extremely diverse.
Right.
We are not
Oh,
we're not a state filled with large cities. We have large cities, yes, and those schools require you to do X, Y, and Z. Meanwhile, you step out where, I mean, I remember when Parkland and I graduated from Northampton. I remember when we were a rural school
Right.
district, and now um, Northampton today for me is what Parkland was when I was in high school 20
Right.
years ago. The big flashy buildings. Look what we bought. Tax, tax, tax. And my biggest gripe as an adult now, I have no children.
Nor do
I'm
I.
not I'm not having children. Like there's unless I can send my cats to school to get an education, the school district means nothing to me.
Right.
I just look at my statement every month and I say my tax bill and my mortgage are literally the same amount of money. And at least, okay, I get a house out of paying my mortgage, but the taxes, what am I getting? I'm getting people fighting over buildings that should be built while ignoring another one. Land that was purchased when I was in grade school finally being developed for whatever reason. And I'm sure you guys deal with the same thing in Parkland.
Well,
It's just
absolutely.
it's just acquire and spend and flashy. And meanwhile, I'm from the year that graduated with our diplomas with our own high school name spelled wrong on it. So anytime I do something that's like kind of messed up, I just point to it. I said, that's my public education. Every time somebody says, oh, we need to defund, Department of Education or get rid of it, I say, I'm a product of a failed system. Fortunately, I'm good with my hands. I made a decent career. I know a lot of people in my graduating class that have college debt in careers that they will, or in topics that they will never get a job in because guess what? That's what we pushed that year. Business admin, accounting, things like that. Did
Right.
I take those classes? I did,
Listen,
but I didn't go to college for it. Like, luckily for me, I have no debt for that because I didn't listen because, well, I was a piece of shit student. I'm just going to be honest there.
well,
But
I'll just add. Listen, I make $41,150. It's online on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I make that much money. Okay, I work for the government. The reality is there are people that are getting their there are people that are getting their licensures or credentials to be um, work for machine operators, machinists, and they're making 100 grand or more
Mhm.
coming right out of high school. I was also on the LCTI Joint Operating Committee, the Career and Technical Institute, and um, I, I used to say half jokingly, I wish I would have gone maybe that route. Um, but there was a stigma to going that route back when we were
Yes.
younger, and you did not want to go anywhere near that. And the reality is, um, I do have a little bit of regret not going that route because look at me, a master's degree, and I'm struggling to get by like most people. But that's something that needs to be addressed. And here's the other part about the budget that people don't realize. And don't get me wrong, I'm very much for school choice. I have a little
Oh,
concern.
so am I.
I have a little concern about cyber with regards to the fact that they overcharge per student per head. But that's another story. The reality of it, though, and this is a very convoluted um, thing to explain. So I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible. The sending
Mm,
school district gets a pot, let's say like a pot of gold or cash, a pot of cash, okay? Depending upon how many students decide to go to charter schools are also deemed public. Depending upon the price per head of that district, that's how much they have to dole out to each of these charter schools in return. So when you
mm,
hear the school boards argue about charter schools, it's because they have to give out a certain amount. Now, mind you, Allentown doesn't have to give out as much per head to these charter schools as Parkland. It's whatever the district has per child per head. Parents argue on the conservative side, which I tend to typically agree with here, that's their child's education, that's their child's fee. It should go with wherever they want it to go. But it does make situations like funding special education a little harder because you could have a special ed student with all the stuff they need with their IEP cost a million plus, depending upon what their needs are and what they need to have a proper education. Um, so it's one of those things, and I don't think people quite grasp um, a lot of how convoluted this could be.
And that's it's honestly it's the same with a lot of other topics. I mean, I don't even need to give examples. It's just we have a problem. It's a complicated problem which requires complicated solutions, but everybody wants that quick clickbait title solution, that 5 second, 10 second, 15 second soundbite of this is how I'm going to solve this problem. And unfortunately, it's not that simple. Take
Right.
anything that's being debated in any sort of political forum right now, and it all comes down to the same thing. We're not having the in depth conversation to touch every little aspect of this problem. You're seeing it from the education level. Quinn and I see it from other levels. And
Right.
it's I don't know how else to like
well,
ring these
just
people's
throw more
there's bell.
money.
And
And
well, no, and that's really what it comes down to. It's like we can't come up with a solution, so let's just put more money into it. Eventually, obviously I'm an animal person, but eventually you have to just say, I no amount of money is going to solve this problem.
and
We
that's
got we
precisely
have to
it.
put Old Yeller down.
Listen,
Mm-hmm.
the perfect examples at the Allentown School District. You look at how much money was spent over the last 20 or 30 years trying to educate these children, and it was an exorbitant amount of money, and all we see is a progressive line going downward of people that aren't even proficient in English or math that attend that school district. Now, I'm not putting down Allentown. I'm just simply saying they're the perfect example of how money doesn't equate to student success.
And like the position I'm at
Exactly.
with my job, I'm in a hiring position. Like I want to bring younger people into the trades because unfortunately we had a very, very large gap of people not getting into it.
Right.
And I have a lot of very skilled people, which I'm exaggerating it slightly, but not. They're dying off. And we're
Right.
going to have positions that are essential to society surviving without people to fill them. So as I'm talking with these 18, 19, 21-year-old kids, and I'm going to call them kids because they have yet to show me that they can act
Right.
like adults. I mean, you find one
Mm,
with work ethic, some common sense, can actually, put out a sentence that you can understand without, all whatever the kids are saying, Riz and shit. Um,
Depends on what they're
it's
learning in
it,
these
and
schools
then
today.
they're they're useless.
Right.
And okay, cool. You put them in a room, or you put them in a school for 8 hours a day. What did they actually come out knowing? Nothing. Half of them. I've had to teach people how to sign their name.
That's
Like they don't know cursive enough to sign their freaking name, and I'm supposed to look at this system and say, "Huh, I'm really happy with where my money's going."
could I just stop you there for a second? So
Absolutely.
this is where I think education is critical. One, we have to go back to teaching cursive. Cursive actually, it's proven cursive helps to bring out creativity, and it enables people to learn how to sign their damn name. You can't sign a check not in cursive. Heck, my stepbrother can't even read cursive. I have to basically read it for him. But every time I write a card for him for his birthday or whatever, I always purposely write in cursive because I feel like it's always a good little review of how to read cursive. I'm not antagonizing. I'm just saying these are skills that we need to learn, or that this next generation needs to learn. They need to learn how to budget. They need to learn how to balance a checkbook. Mind you, checkbooks are going on the wayside, but they still have to have that idea because it's digital now. But it's still, how much money do you have out? How much money do you have in? If you don't, have enough in, you're going to run into a deficit, and that's not a good thing either. We need to teach these kids 21st century skill set to ensure that they have the tools to succeed. Listen, when we were growing up, AI wasn't a thing. Okay, mind
Hmm.
you, as a political science and English major, the English major in me is beyond heartbroken that people don't really have to write anymore. That artificial intelligence has taken that over. However, that also means that we need to make sure that whatever we do as far as teaching, we make sure that, you know, the skills we teach them are relevant for the next 50, 60 years. Because obviously what we were taught, you know, there needs to be a progression is what I'm saying. An
Well, I
actual
mean, even
progression.
even just in like
And
in our
and
timeline, look how
and,
much technology has changed. I mean,
and,
we
and
went from you're not
also,
going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket to I
Yeah.
literally have access to every piece of text ever at the
uh,
Right.
touch of a fingertip.
I've actually heard this once, and it's possibly true, but I would like to hear your opinion. They don't teach cursive because they don't want kids to grow up learning how to read the actual documents of the Constitution written in cursive. And on top of that, there's this organization that hands out constitutions to the students, and the school said, "Oh, don't be doing that."
I wouldn't necessarily go that far. I would just simply say school districts kind of look at, in my personal opinion, and this is unfortunate, but cursive is more archaic in the form of writing than it is because they're looking at things digitally. And you know what? You're right. You could go on your phone. Yeah, I love Wicked. You could go on your phone and use a scientific calculator. I was just thinking this when you guys were talking. It was like a badge of honor your sixth or seventh grade year of high or middle school to get that big scientific calculator and then
Yeah,
learn how to write the
yeah,
crazy.
the big TI calculator that
Right.
was the size of well, I mean, like this is incredible to
Right.
me. Like the fact that we had a calculator
Right.
that was the size of a freaking brick, a
Right.
literal brick.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's
You
it's
can have
just
everything on your phones these days.
right.
Thankfully.
Absolutely. But here's the thing, we need leaders, whether it's on the school board level, whether it's on the township level, whether it's on the state or federal level, that are forward thinking, that demand more. I always demanded more from the administration, Dr. Madsen, and before him, Rich Nizak, because I felt that Parkland deserved better. The,
Well,
the-
and
let
oh,
me just finish
and
my top. Let me just finish my topic.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's the equivalent of it would be the equivalent of Apple. Okay, you look at Apple. The phone design is the same. Okay, yes, they make different changes, but how many more years could they go with having the same exact design before another company comes in and creates something even better? That's
Mm.
more. The point I'm trying to get at is there's only so long you could coast with being deemed the premier or the best before somebody else comes in with newer, fresher ideas. And I feel that we're at a stage with Parkland where we need to connect with students a different way. We need to bring back um, finance. We need, hell, I'd even say we have to bring back home ec. People need to learn how to freaking cook. I mean,
No, no,
And,
no. You got drive through and DoorDash and microwaves and
but but my point is
on
that's a
top of
life
that,
skill that brings out creativity.
and that's the thing. I don't think the schools are teaching kids how to think. They're teaching them what to think. And with that, if any of you has ever taken an Uber or a Lyft, Um, I've actually had drivers that didn't know how to get to an entrance of a building that was pathetically easy to find because they're following only the GPS, but they couldn't use their brains
Right.
when they needed to find the entrance of that building.
Well understood. Listen. I would say at the heart of it that you know we need to teach critical thinking. And
bingo.
critical thinking. Um, you teach students how to the process of understanding. Okay, you don't teach them what to think. You teach them how to process information, how to analyze information, and then you let them formulate an opinion based on the curricular aims or goals that lesson provided. Okay, and here's a case in point. Okay, Republicans so far, dare I say, if the left tries to call us Nazis, okay? What they failed to realize is the Democratic president in that time also set up an internment camp for the Japanese, okay? Think critically, okay, about this. If you thought critically about it, you would realize, do you know what I mean? Now, mind you,
Yeah.
we never killed the Japanese. However, it is a stain, nevertheless, on FDR's legacy,
Yes.
okay? But how many teachers in your middle or high school actually taught that lesson? Listen, I'm not saying that I wouldn't consider that DEI. I would consider that just history that's overlooked. Part of the issue I have with DEI is that I feel that it's used to hide or cover some of these issues I brought out, some of these inadequacies. And when, money, you throw money at the problem with that ends up being if there's if the solution of it is it's not working, well, you either have to fix it or you have to find like a scapegoat to try to keep the status quo. And I think that while Parkland is doing a good job, okay, compared to other districts, it is decreasing when it comes to the PSSAs. And I know that's not popular. I get it's not popular. I absolutely despise state standardized tests. But there's one thing we have to acknowledge. Okay, if students are going downhill with these assessments, one has to question whether or not the curriculum needs to be improved, and we need to find meaningful solutions to be able to connect to every student in a more student centric approach.
Well, and yeah, because the one size fits all teaching methods do not work because everyone has a different way of learning. And like the way all three of us learn could be totally different. And if the one size fits all, a teacher was to teach the three of us, let's say me and Johnny fell and you that can learn that way would be successful. So it just wouldn't work. Now, let's say they teach another method to where Johnny's method would work, and you and I would fail because that method doesn't work on us. You know what I'm saying?
Could I address that concern? So
Oh, yeah,
teachers,
yeah.
listen, I have a master's in education. Teachers learn how to do a layered lesson. What I mean by that is, let me think of something. Let me think of something. Civil War, okay?
Mm
You bring up about how Lincoln won the presidency, okay? Or how he was honest, okay? Honest Abe. And you start it out, you introduce it, you analyze the students based on what you're saying in your initial 10 or 15-minute explanation. And if there are people that are struggling with it, that's where the roads diverge. You work a little more closely with the ones that are struggling, the ones that are kind of getting it. You give them maybe a project to do, okay? And the ones that totally get it, that at this point they're just bored out of their mind, you give them like an essay or something to write, okay? The point being, it eventually all comes back where people kind of get an idea of everything. It's just there's different roads that people take, or different routes people take to get to the end result. And teachers have to be willing to take those additional routes to be able to find connections with every student. And
hmm.
that's even more critical when you consider students with special needs have to be in the least restrictive environment. Case in point, by the time I was in high school, the only special ed class I was in was basically a special study hall for people with special needs. So I
Wow,
was
they
in
really took
regular,
care of you.
what?
I said, wow, they really took care of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is, when you've got special needs kids in a regular education class, bear in mind this, the regular education teacher only has to take roughly 2 or 3 special ed classes during their bachelor's or their master's. They're not specialists in special ed, but they do have to master the art of that tiered multi-level curriculum to be able to connect to every student, because not every student's going to grasp everything. And there are some students who, for one class might be on a lower level of understanding. The next class, when it's something they're more familiar with, they may spring right up there. So you never know. Never know.
So I'm gonna go full boomer right now because I remember growing up, and I'm sure everybody else here can attest to it. We can't get new books; they're too expensive, and for whatever reason, I still hear people making that argument. We're in a digital age. Why do we even need physical copies of books anymore? As far as on the mass scale. I mean, I'm not saying don't have physical books at the school, but why are kids not reading from tablets, where things can
Well,
be
they are.
updated?
So
Okay, because
there's
I was going to say, I'm going to show my ignorance as far as how school works right now. But in my mind, it's like, I mean, my stepdaughter's 21, so obviously she did not
right.
graduate that long ago, but she was still carrying around like these massive textbooks. And I'm thinking to myself back then, I'm like, you're giving them Chromebooks. Why
Right.
can't all of this be digitized on there so they can at least, you don't want them carrying backpacks around because of security reasons. And like, look, we understand why. And okay, so you want this kid to just carry around 40 pounds of books?
Right.
You already
So
gave him the damn tablet.
here's the deal. These, I know this because I was on the school board. The reality is, when it comes to these textbooks, these deals, the textbooks you buy, they're supposed to last like 5 years. And by the end of their life, the teachers then have to come up with other resources because then they start becoming, you look at a 5 year span. If you buy books now, 5 years from now, Trump's not going to be in office. So
Right.
by the end of their lifespan, they need to come up with other resources as a way to facilitate that bridge that might be lacking in the book. Nevertheless, those books are very expensive, more
Oh yeah.
expensive than you could probably imagine. Um, what I've witnessed is not all of them are like the textbooks you and I had, where you just read it, you put a cover on it, and you return it. A lot of them now, they get like new ones per semester, and the students actually have an online portion that they do, and then they also handwrite in the book, so it's a little more tactile than what you and I
Okay.
had. They both kind of intermix. So, but it is that textbook though, cute cat. That textbook
Oh yeah, it's Nugget.
serves as a bridge to help shape the curriculum. So the perception of curriculum is it's this pre-written thing. Curriculum actually is the state standardized test, or sorry, the state standards, okay, on one hand, all right, mixed with the subject matter on the other. And the idea is that the standards, you have to take the subject matter and try to have goals with the standards. And whether it's to have a basic understanding or more comprehensive understanding of a certain topic or whatnot, that's what the curriculum ends up being, a mixture of both. And so a
Okay.
textbook helps to facilitate that, because then the teacher's not having to come up with different resources. Listen, we saw issues with this in the Bethlehem area school district. Did you hear about the faulty curriculum that asks students about, reporting a slave master or something? What would you do? The reality is that was horrific. That should have never been put out there, but it was. And the question becomes, how much latitude do we give these teachers to be able to utilize their amazing craft to inspire and educate these students, meanwhile being loyal to whatever policies are set forth by the school board, and in turn, put together through the administration into um, the plan, the
Okay,
curriculum.
so we have about 15 minutes, give or take. So I want to ask this question. As a school board member, what are the things that you plan to fight for to make positive changes to the Parkland School District?
Okay, thank you for bringing up. That's a good one. I'm a major advocate for governmental transparency. As a matter of fact, when I ran in 2019, um, I believe it was, believe it or not, the meeting before the general election or the primary election, I brought something up ingeniously. And I said, why aren't these school board meetings live streamed? It's 2019. It's 2019. Why do you have to come in person? I said, my elderly grandmother would love to know what's going on in the district, but she physically just can't make it out to the board meeting. This is bullshit. And believe it or not, that simple idea inspired and motivated a lot of people to come and vote for me, and I was honored to have their support. But that's just one part of it. You look at the agendas the Parkland School Board has. It'll have the topic of what they're voting on in the blurb for the motion, but when it comes to the attachments and the actual expenses, some of that stuff's hidden from the public. And so it
Hmm.
goes back to, is the Parkland School Board or other school boards or other governmental agencies for that matter doing the bare minimum to abide by the Sunshine Act? Is Parkland's failure to put up a stupid agenda, okay, only 24 hours before the meeting occurs, good governmental practice or bad governmental practice. We literally had, when I was on the board, we literally had to reschedule a board meeting for failure to post at that 24-hour mark. It sounds ridiculous, but that's what happened. And so I've always pushed for governmental transparency, committee meetings as well. They'll literally have the arts and academics committee meeting at like 9 a.m. when people are at work. That's a problem. Anything that the body does, the governmental body does, should be done at a time when the majority of people in the community are off work. So think 5 or later in the afternoon.
Hmm.
But you know what? Common sense goes out the window. And the other thought I had, and this is something that I would ask the Parkland voters or any voter for that matter to think about is you want people that are independent minded. You want pragmatic leadership. You want people that are going to go in there and question whether or not this is genuinely what the district or the taxpayers want. Bear in mind, the school board works for the taxpayer. The superintendent works for the school board. It can't be the other way around. And so when we discuss different things, there needs to be a sense of, you know, you know, trust but verify. All I'm seeing and all I've ever seen is trust. These 9-0 votes are ruining the ability to afford a a home in Parkland. I mean, it's getting astronomical. It really is.
Mm.
It's not even
And
just,
it,
and it's not just Parkland either. Like you said,
It's a lot.
people can't afford to live anywhere
No,
anymore.
the price of
And
eggs is a crazy amount of money. $8 a.
I bought my house 10 years ago. I could not afford to buy it today.
Oh hell no! You
I
know
mean,
my
it's just absolutely freaking insane, like what speculation has done. It just in my neighborhood. Like this was a just average neighborhood in the '80s when it came
listen.
together.
My dad's house, the house I'm in right now, cost $750,000. Okay, my mom's house, she bought it, was like four fifty. My neighbor joked and said the only way he'd sell his house is if somebody gave him $1 million. Mind you, my mom lives in a townhouse community.
Mhm.
All right. I literally had a conversation with the realtor, and she tried to say that this one end unit to a townhouse was going to be $750,000. I said, at the end of the day, what makes anyone want a townhouse if it costs the exact same as a house that used to cost $350,000-$400,000? It's just asinine.
Yeah, like when I was in high school, what my house is worth right now, I would look at and we would call those the rich folk.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I get it. You know, obviously, inflation has affected what you can buy with a dollar. But like I said, I've had just random offers on my house, sight unseen, for a number that I couldn't even fathom
Right.
20 years
But
ago.
but though here's another thing that's important to say. A lot of these people that are buying their homes, okay, the property value hasn't been updated in years. By years, I mean it could be like 20 years. So the price you're paying for property taxes is at a rate that isn't truly what your home is worth. We're seeing an issue in the Pittsburgh Allegheny area where one of the school districts out there, I think it was Pittsburgh, is suing the Democratic county executive because they're saying they need to redetermine the cost of these homes, and the community is furious because what they're saying is if we revalue all our properties and they go up, it goes up to what it's genuinely going to be, we're going to be taxed out of our house.
Yeah.
And
mm.
that's the issue. you know we could see in the future if something like that is pushed by
So
this Democratic governor.
So we end up with more homeless people
You know,
through these unnecessary taxes and unnecessary inflation, all
it's
because the
interesting.
government.
It's interesting. You bring up homelessness. There's this new movie out, and it's an incredible movie. It's called No Address. I highly recommend you see it. It's a really good
Hmm.
movie. But long story short, it goes into three or four different stories, and it explains how homelessness affects people differently and how people become homeless. And it might surprise you. It's not what you think it would be. There's various reasons. Like the main female, she was homeless because her mom died when she was young. She went into foster care, and then the day of her graduation, all her crap was out on the yard,
Hmm.
and she had nowhere to go. Another guy, had an issue with gambling and had a prestigious job, but lost everything and became homeless with his family. So, point taken. Though this could very easily, cause a conundrum. In fact, I was just at a realtor event where they spoke about this issue with the fact that people are not willing to sell their properties and downsize because the cost to downsize isn't worth it
Right.
when the smaller home is just as expensive as the home they're leaving until they're stuck with too much of a house. And the problem with that is if somebody like you or I, okay, that really doesn't have kids, but like stepkids or whatever, and they move out, the reality is those younger families that want to move into these bigger homes don't have that capability to do so. And so it creates this issue where there's not enough homes for the amount of people that are moving into the area. And we see that even in Parkland, quite frankly.
Hmm. So, so Parkland's overspending on on things that could be done cheaper, on things that don't make sense, and the education. How's the education in Parkland
Well,
specifically?
let me rephrase that a bit. They're not necessarily spending on nonsense. What they're spending on stuff that needs to be expensed. The problem is, I argue, is it stuff that needs to be expensed today, or is it something that we could
That
hold
we
off
can
a bit
wait.
while we fix the HVAC system and make the expand. A lot of these stupid little things, I argue could sit on the back burner while we fix the high school to make it bigger for the population growth. Again, it's prioritizing the expenses when needed and making sure that we don't necessarily get the Cadillac quality, but we get a quality nevertheless that lasts, but isn't a Lamborghini.
Oh yeah, yeah. You
Let's buy the
buy.
Buick, not the
It's like
Lamborghini.
instead of buying a Lamborghini, just get a Ford. That
Precisely,
works.
precisely. And the Ford lasts 20 plus years, so
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with it.
Nah. You don't need the best of the best of everything. You just need something that works.
Precisely.
And and then and also, has anyone gotten a raise in the upper levels of government through the
So
tax
that's
hikes that
an interesting.
could have been used for other people for other things?
Well, contractually speaking, all the teachers, all the administrators get raises every year. The only ones that don't necessarily get raises, believe it or not, are the bus drivers because they're deemed part time. Okay.
Hmm.
During the pandemic, we had this bonus program where if they committed to coming in X number of days, okay, they got this much. If they came in and bust greater, they got more. The reality was that ended up becoming a permanent raise because they were being underpaid. Okay,
Hmm.
I had no problem with that because the reality of it all is those are people that typically don't get a lot of money. I think it's 100 a day or something. It's not a lot, okay? And if we don't have the bus drivers to bus our children, we're going to be in a shitload of trouble. So it's appreciating those like the bus drivers, like the cafeteria workers, like the teacher assistants, okay, that don't necessarily that you don't necessarily hear about as often, or even the mechanics that fix the buses, okay? Because let's remember, Parkland actually owns the buses. They employ the bus drivers. Not every district could say that anymore. Some of them,
Yeah, most of them sub it out to a third
yeah.
party, and it's just a contract basis.
So the reality of all this is it's appreciating what you have with certain areas and other areas. Like for instance, I said I think maybe it's time we look at reorganizing the administration to make it less top heavy. Okay, putting some of that
Mm-hmm.
money back into the students. Okay, into the classrooms, because I feel like there could be redundancies in certain job postings. Like we've got two assistant superintendents, we've got directors under them. And I'm not saying that, to get rid of the two assistant superintendents. What I'm saying though is as
I gotta break up a cat
retirements,
fight real quick. I'll be right back. I'm sorry.
sorry, it's fine. As retirements occur, we should really look at the job descriptions and see, if it's something that somebody else could add to their job duties already as retirements occur. And that's one way we could save money. Another way we could save money is making sure that outside of the cost of maintaining the buildings and grounds, um, we utilize our money in a wiser way. Like this, I brought up the carbon Lehigh intermediate unit. I believe they're a great resource to help defer some of the costs with special education for some of the students. They're also utilized for teacher education, and that's a perfect way one can consider um, going about taking some of the burden off a singular district. Because remember, the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit, that district, the boundaries that the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit has, the sending districts all pay into it. So sometimes paying for things through a collective, no different than LCTI, makes it more cost effective for everyone, like we do with the cost associated with um, the price for gas or for food. There's certain collective agreements we make as multiple districts together to help make the dollar run a little further.
Sorry.
And okay, so are there any final we're at the end of the show. Is there any final thoughts that you want to give to us
Yeah, I would just I would
before
just I would just say that debates could get heated. People's feelings in the school board meeting could get hurt because, they're used to the 9-0 vote. Questioning something and demanding a debate for people to hear where members stand is not a bad thing. I'm not saying the board has to oppose everything. I'm just saying in a government body, I feel like debate, having people having differences of opinion, being able to question administrators and actually utilize common sense, forward thinking leadership would enable the best result. And at the end of the day, I think most people are pragmatic in how they think, and being able to create our own board policies that best meet the needs of all our students. That's at the heart of it, you know. And I just want to say again, I'm all for parents picking the best quality of education for their child. Listen, my sister went to uh, Nichman until she was suicidal, and then my parents took her out and put her into a cyber charter school. That didn't work, and then we put her into one near our house, and that ended up being a really good fit for her. And arguably, not even arguably, factually, all the students that came out of that charter school ended up having a lot better test scores than what came out of Bethlehem at the time period. So whatever educational institution your child would learn best in, that's the best thing with that. But as a Parkland school board director, if I would be reelected to that board, mind you, I did lose my last election. I'm trying to get back onto it. I would push for transparency, accountability, and good governance, because I feel like this current board, if the administration asked for a 5% raise, they'd be like, you need a 5.5% raise or in taxes to get what you want. And that's where I take some issue, because we do want a good level. We do want a high quality of education, but not at the cost of having people lose their houses.
Well,
Seems extremely
thank
reasonable
you.
to me.
Well, thank you, Patrick, for being on our show. And I would like, and maybe after the main election, win, lose, or draw, you can come back on. Hopefully, you win. That way, we can have a podcast about everything you're excited about doing. But if you should lose, and I hope not, we can do a show basically on what you think we should expect for the Parkland School District.
They'll be
And
good. I'd enjoy that.
yeah, but hopefully it's I'm excited because I'm gonna fight for this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, honestly, if you were in my school district, you'd have my vote. Mainly because you just have like, I don't know, common sense, which, well, we know it's not that common anymore.
No, it isn't. It really isn't.
And what as far as like, from a political standpoint, what I really appreciated the most about you as a candidate is you didn't come here and try and sell yourself. We asked you questions, you answered them truthfully. There was no showmanship. There was no real like name calling. Like I was a level of professionalism which I didn't even know existed in politics, because I know these school board things are like freaking crazy.
Oh, they
So,
absolutely are.
bravo to you for that. Like that alone, like we could disagree and I'd still be like, it's the most level headed son of a bitch out there. So let's just vote that guy.
Thank you. That
Yep.
means a lot. That means a lot.
And
You try to get
everyone,
them.
if you wanna support our work here, uh, go on WRGOA, grab yourself a Human Lives Matter T-shirt, because because back in the 80s we were taught we only have one race, human, as opposed to today, multiple races. Psh. But hey, it was good having you, Patrick, and you have a good night, all right? And we'll
You
see
too.
you again.
Bye.
See ya, man, and see ya, audience.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining in.